It's called propofol and popsicles. Those are probably two of my son's favorite parts of ALD monitoring, and I'll get to that. You know, I am both an ALD mom and an ALD patient, so that comes up. So here's John, my son as he is today. Well, he's not likely wearing a button-down shirt today, wherever he is. He's 18, he's interested in computer programming and math and computer games. He does have a black belt in karate, and he plays on the tennis team. As an aside, I will note he had to play on the tennis team because he had made the election not to register for gym class this year, and we found out he couldn't graduate from high school because he didn't sign up for physical education. So tennis it is. Next month he graduates. He'll be attending university in California in the fall, which, if anyone's curious, that is a mere 2,597 miles from our home on the East Coast in Boston. So we are entering an exciting phase of transition of care, which is a whole thing unto itself. But anytime I really talk about ALD, this is who I'm thinking of. This is John in 2010 when he was diagnosed and when our story began. Just briefly, just to give you a brief overview of what I'm gonna chat about, an introduction to my family and his diagnostic odyssey, which is a little different from stories, a brief dalliance into our family history, the fun of genetics, and also his current treatments and some of the challenges of living with an early ALD diagnosis. So here are my three kids, John, Charlotte, and Maggie. John is the second of my three children, born in 2005. Things seemed normal from the start, but he also had every just little things going wrong. He had, skin issues. He had breast milk jaundice. He had hypospadias. He had a whole bunch of unrelated and I always, as a mother, I kept my eye on him because there was always something going on. He also had multi-seed and nut allergies. He had low-level asthma. He had just a whole bunch of other things. So again, just keeping my eye on my prince in the middle of his two sisters. So then we come to 2010, and it was winter, and we noticed that he was still, just one day I noticed he was very tan, like Caribbean vacation tan, and we live in a snowy, cold place on the East Coast in the States, and it just seemed off, and he had no tan line. And I thought, that's a strange thing. So courtesy of Dr. Google, I looked up no tan line, and one of the things that came up was Addison's disease or adrenal insufficiency. And I thought, that's interesting. I have a sister with Addison's disease since childhood, so we'll just put a pin in that. And then I looked at the other symptoms that might go along with adrenal insufficiency. He was a salt seeker. He ate very bland food, which I attributed to, he was 5 at the time, I attributed it just to being a picky child, but he ate everything plain, no spice, no flavor, a lot of milk. And he was a low energy kid, which worked out great for me as a mom with 3 under 4, I had 3 within 3.5 years. So I had 3 young children, and having someone who wanted to sit and look at a book or hold a car really worked out for me. So I never thought of that as a symptom. But then I asked my father, who was a neurologist, always very helpful if you can be diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder to have a neurologist in the family. I said, I think he might have Addison's. like my sister? And he said, oh, I ran down what I thought, and he said, oh, good catch. You should get that tested. And I'll here just a few pictures of John's tan. It made sense. The first two, these are the beginning of the school year. He was already still tan, darker than his sisters, but then as the fall and winter progressed, he was still tan. And I'm not sure if you can see from where you're sitting, but his knuckles are very dark. He has some white patching on his face. He's got some, again, any place, his inner arms, his ankles, his neck, any place that the skin was bunching up was getting darker and darker. And in hindsight, now I can see it, but at the time, it took us a minute to figure this out. So he gets diagnosed with Addison's disease or adrenal insufficiency. I use the term Addison's disease because that's what my sister had been diagnosed with. I know that endocrinologists will point out that there are many pathways to adrenal insufficiency and that Addison's disease may not be the absolute correct term. But so he began cortisone replacement, and we met a new child. This is my favorite analogy. He went from an Eeyore to a Tigger. So the boy who wanted to sit on my lap and hold a book while holding a car, it's like all the switches got turned on. All of a sudden, when he had play dates with friends and my friends' boys would be climbing and kicking and destroying in my house, and there was John with a car, and I thought, my friends aren't very good parents. Being honest, look at my son, I have a lap boy. And lo and behold, no, he was just adrenally insufficient because once he got replacement cortisone, he came into his own. And that went for his thought processes as well. So he had been in kindergarten, in school, and seemed to be starting to fall behind his peers. And within 2 weeks of cortisone replacement, he could read. All the discussions that we had about all, potential things we should work on just kind of evaporated, and there was no looking back. But then one day, we got a call from the endocrinologist a few weeks later, and she said, how's John doing? And I thought, this is strange. This is not, I don't know what it's like here, but in the States, you don't usually get a follow-up call out of the blue from a specialist. And I said, he's great. Thanks so much for the cortisone. He's a new child. And they said, well, we'd like you to come back. If you could come back, I've cleared the end of my day. Don't bring your kids. And I said, oh, could you tell me what's happening? And she said, well, I don't want to tell you. It'll be upsetting. You'll misunderstand. We'll just talk about it when you get here. And I said, I promise I won't look it up. But would you please just give me something? And so I think she thought she was being very opaque, and she said, well, he has very elevated, very long-chain fatty acids. And I said, okay, thanks so much. Hung up, called my father. And my dad said, it took him by surprise. My dad said, well, that's a death sentence, force a retest. And I said, well, thanks for your candor, Dad, but what is this? He said, oh, that's adrenal leukodystrophy. Again, demand a retest, we'll figure things out. And so we went in that evening, and yes, it was adrenal leukodystrophy. By that point, I'd had a whole day to look it up on the internet. It was not great news. There was not great things on the internet. There was no hope, there was no positivity, basically worst case scenario. We got very lucky because we got diagnosed at Mass Gen in Boston, and they had already made an appointment for us to see a person you met earlier today, Dr. Florian Eichler, the very next day. So that was the first in a string of very lucky events for our family. But so we went in, we met with Dr. Eichler. My husband and I are a bit nerdy, so we had a PowerPoint presentation that we had provided because we had read many. My dad had a PubMed subscription, because back in the day it wasn't open source for everything, so we pulled up all these articles and we had read up, and I had questions about the boy in footnote 6 of Patrick Auberg's Dr. Eichler was thrilled to meet us, I'm sure. He kind of wanted us to pump the brakes because we said, well, is there, if we're getting a transplant, do we have to go to Paris for, what's happening? So we stepped things back, and he said, you don't even know if this is a situation. You're being diagnosed, not like how those people on the internet are being diagnosed. You're being diagnosed with this kind of early symptom of adrenal insufficiency, and let's just wait and see. So we, made all the appointments. While we were waiting for our MRI, we took the kids and got both the girls tested to see if they would be potential matches if he needed a transplant. And I understand there are many different concerns about testing pediatric girls, et cetera, et cetera. Some folks at the testing site attempted to bring these up, and I was not having it. So I said, that's so great. Thanks so much. Thanks for telling me. You probably would have told me not to have kids if you knew I had ALD. I'm pretty great with the 3 I have. And thanks so much for suggesting that it's inappropriate for me to test my girls. As a small aside, I don't think anyone should interfere with a family who wants to test a girl. So anywho, just briefly then, that brings to our family history. So this is not an official genetic chart. And this does not include my whole family. So my beloved spouse and many others are left off. But this is our ALD family tree. So I got the girls tested. They were both HLA compatible, and they did not have ALD. So that was one exhale. I had ALD. My sister, strangely, who has been adrenally insufficient since childhood and on replacement cortisone at this point for 40 plus years. She'd be thrilled I'm announcing that internationally. She also has ALD. My mother has ALD. Her brother died mysteriously. There's a square Daniel, died mysteriously in the 50s, not diagnosed with ALD, but we're just going to play a little photo game. So here's my Uncle Daniel in his high school yearbooks, and that's normal. I think this is 1952. And then we're going to back out and see that he is a little darker than his peers. He had not been traveling. We're going to start, and we used, after the fact, we have gone through and played Find Uncle Danny, because he is, I found him for you. It's not like Where's Waldo. But we're going to see this tangent through a bunch of pictures. This is the last yearbook picture we had because he passed away shortly after his high school graduation in 1955. At the time, it was described as pneumonia, which I believe was a very useful catch-all for undiagnosed, terrible, short-lived illness. But my mom has suggested that, she watched my sister as a child going through crisis, and that's how she could identify what her brother, she said, that looks a lot like how my brother passed away in his final days. So moving on to a happier topic is my patient, John. This is all his current treatment. In the blue boxes that have white lettering, so neurology, naturally, endocrine, yes, because he's caught through his adrenal insufficiency, and nephrology is still a constant. That is a holdover from our old Lorenzo's oil trial days, and if you got numbers that were skewed once, likely to having a flu or something, we just can seemingly never get out of nephrology now. It's always good news, but it's just one more visit. On the other half is what he has gotten from his other side of the family. So I don't want you to think that he has only received, trouble from his mom with ALD. He sees cardiology. It's unrelated to ALD. His dad is a congestive heart failure patient since his 30s, allergy, and again, I mentioned that he's got multi-seed and nut allergies. Who doesn't want to hang out with this kid? And we have added psych treatment, and I think that's probably wise for anyone who's been monitored, certainly as long as John, and for probably any of us who are symptomatic or adjacent to symptomatic folks. But it's not, it's not a small project. But really, we get to his favorite part, at least when he was a boy, MRIs with propofol. So I know some kids resist the MRIs. I know some kids are not happy to be sedated. My son loved it, which maybe is, again, something to think about. Let's put an asterisk in that for just keeping an eye on him. I will say that we're seeing at Mass General in Boston. They have wonderful child life specialists who always made it seem playful, and they used to take you could pick your flavor of chapstick that they would rub on the inside of the mask so that the gas would smell like bubble gum or grape or some other flavor. That's my husband. As an aside, what is propofol? Propofol is a wonder that helps with sedation that's what we use in the States. It also may be what brought down Michael Jackson, but that's another talk. And afterwards was his other favorite part, popsicles. So he had a very limited fat diet because he was not because he was part of the Lorenzo's oil trial. And so it was basically any Freezy Pop, any Icy, any Italian ice, anything that was fat-free was always something fun afterwards. I will note that after, he was only sedated for MRIs for the first couple years, and then he moved on to wearing goggles. So again, how great is this? He would get to watch a movie in the MRI, and as long as he held still, so nothing too funny or too scary, then he was golden. Now, as an adult, he says he's sad to see the movies go. No movie goggles, so maybe we could bring that back. But MRI was his hustle every 6 months until adolescence. I will say that there's a general cutoff that most neurologists will use for, when you move from the 6-month protocol to a 1-year more adult-like protocol. We pushed that in John's case because I felt like his adolescence was delayed. And I thought I don't want to go along with a generic from some textbook cutoff when his age is not matching that kind of developmentally. And I'm sure he's in Miami right now at a conference. I'm sure he's thrilled that I'm talking about delayed adolescence, but again, this is what happens when I travel alone. Also, in addition to MRIs, he had blood work done. He saw endocrine every 3 months. Eventually transitioned to every 4 months, and he got blood draws every month because, again, he was part of the Lorenzo's oil protocol, which required monthly blood draws. So for him, his monitoring is really broken down into 2 phases. There's the ALD, and really the adrenal insufficiency is our main concern on a daily basis because he's been fortunate and monitored through early MRIs that will, we hope, show changes before he has any physical neurological changes. So adrenal insufficiency requires cortisone replacement, crisis management. He had some growth concerns because endocrinologists are artists and they're really trying to figure out what are the right levels to make sure that we maintain appropriate growth. And as your body grows, it burns your meds in different ways. Also, for ALD, we had to consider his MRIs. He got ceramic braces so that he didn't have to have all of it taken off every 6 months. If you haven't, it was a big deal. He was part of the Lorenzo's oil trial, and we've had a lot of emotional questions. Why am I different? Why am I on all these pills? What does ALD mean? In the internet age, when you can find anything, and again, the internet does not have great news about ALD, that's been a challenge. But I'm still grateful that we know, and I think he is as well. And it put us in a great opportunity, in the best situation to try and monitor. And so this is where he was at the start. You know, we knew nothing, but we were lucky enough to be put with a specialized ALD neurologist and just trust what was coming. Also to enjoy every day and let the little stuff fall away, because time is not promised to any of us, and we were living our life in 6-month increments of, so still tan, 2011, and obviously just come from a blood draw. And then over the years, we managed to have as normal a life as you can when you have a giant pill case, and every once in a while go into adrenal crisis and your untrained mom gives you shots, right? But no worse for wear. In 2017, that's him drinking his Lorenzo's oil out of a graduated cylinder. 2019 is a picture of him with his clear braces. So again, trying to make regular teen life in America work. There's our COVID kitten in 2021. So my advice to anyone who finds themselves in a position where you have this gift of monitoring, I know without newborn screening, if you're monitoring a child for as long as I have, it doesn't come from a happy place. It comes from other family tragedy. But to really try to celebrate the fact that you have opportunities, that they are advancing the field. In America, I often say, don't mourn a healthy baby, don't mourn a healthy boy, because you're losing all the good time, and it's possible to have this knowledge and still live a full life. Yes, there's an impact on women with ALD, and I'm a patient. So that is, hard to, as a parent, it's hard to want to put any focus off of him and onto me, but over the years, ALD has made it clear that that's not an option to ignore. What can you do? Getting involved, social media, with that caveat that sometimes it can be crazy and cruel, and sometimes it can be wonderful and supportive. And I see people that I interact with on social media here from across the miles, and it can be a gift. Also participating, everyone here is already doing it, participating in Alex TLC and any other organization. We're all available online. Newborn screening, I guess I have a very American attitude. It's very necessary. I don't see any hesitation. And also amplifying our voice with FDA, NHS, and industry. I've been fortunate that in 2013, I got together and collaborated with many of the experts in this field, and we formed ALD Connect. In September, we celebrate our 10th year, and we've had such a joy working with Alex TLC and other organizations. But really, I think it's the personal connection and realizing that across the miles, it really is just, there's so much more bringing us together, and that there are so many ways to help each other. So with that, just keep calm and fight ALD. And thanks very much. There's my email address. Don't ever hesitate to reach out, questions, concerns, or anything that you think ALD Connect might be able to help with. Thanks for having me.